Hello and welcome to the Selling Impact podcast. This show is about the business of doing good. And in this episode, we have a super interesting guest. Peter, one of the co-founders of Retraced. We all know that the fashion industry, the apparel, clothing, whatever you might call it industry, is one of the most polluting in the world, right? Super complicated problem because supply chains are everywhere all over the world and often across multiple continents. And it can be really difficult for those big corporates, the big brands. It can be really difficult for them to get an actual overview of what the sustainability impact across their whole supply chain looks like, because the supply chains just can get super complicated. The data is hard to find, which means decision making around sustainability is super difficult for these brands. And that is exactly what Retraced help do. Their special sauce is that they are a platform that has the whole supply chain on it. So from the start of the supply chain to the actual brands. They work with some of the biggest brands in the world. Victoria's Secret, Marco Polo, Daisy Gal. You can go to their website and read all those big brands that they work with. They're really the number one of the platforms in their fashion and apparel space when it comes to integrating with their supply chain on sustainability. Super interesting. And in this episode, we're going to be speaking with him about the story. Also going to be diving into how they've managed to grow this platform so much. Because, of course, it is quite a complicated one to grow with all of these different continents involved and all of these different stakeholders that are sometimes super hard to reach. And Peter will just tell everything openly. I absolutely love speaking to him about it. He's not scared of sharing anything. So super interesting episodes. I'm sure very valuable for all of you. For me, at least it was. I learned a bunch from this, and I hope you will too. Enjoy the episode and enjoy listening to Peter. Hi, Peter. How you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm doing very well. And you, Keith?
Good. And I'm excited to have you on the show. So thank you for making the time to share your story.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure, definitely.
Good. I really want to start this off just by giving you the stage to share what it is that you do, what you've built, and a bit of the background story behind it.
Yeah, so let me get started. I'm Peter, CTO, CISO, and co-founder of Retraced. And in Retraced, we are building the leading platform for sustainability management of supply chains in the apparel industry. So we help all companies in the apparel industry, that is brands we all know, like Tom Taylor, S. Oliver, to work on this one platform with all their manufacturers together, so all their supply chain partners. And those manufacturers also get their supply chain partners on the platform and their supply chain partners down to actually the raw material farmer in best case, so that everyone collaborates together in this one platform. Idea being, sustainability management requires all participants. I mean, on shallow level, you can do it alone, but nowadays the legislation requirement is just higher than that. So you have to actually work with your partners together. And since the fashion industry, apparel industry, with its legacy hasn't been that digitalized, so there are silo solutions. It's just that they now do this leapfrog into completely connecting together in this one platform. And I mean, aspects of exchange could be audits, certificates, any kind of company documents like code of conducts, as well to products, orders, you name it. So all around sustainability management.
That's fantastic. This is always the big challenge you hear corporates have, right? In terms of getting the whole supply chain involved with the sustainability story, because that's where the real emissions are, right? So super interesting that you've got a solution for that, and that it's kind of a platform model, right, where we'll dive into later. I'm curious about why it is that you started this. How did you see this as an opportunity, and what is the backstory behind it?
The backstory is super nice. So I have two other co-founders, and actually they approached me. We know each other from high school back in Germany, so a really long time. I went away in a technical direction, worked as SAP, Hewlett Packard, even in China on ERP solutions, then came all the way back to Europe. We always kind of loosely stayed in touch, and they started their own footwear brand called Kano. So one of my co-founders, Philip, he actually also studied in Mexico, and he was there locally, and he really appreciated the style, the cultural style of shoes they had. And he came up with Lucas, my second co-founder, to actually export these shoes and actually put them on the German market. And obviously they faced a lot of difficulties. Now we're talking about 2016-17. In order to position themselves, they thought, okay, well, we actually know the supply chain. So since Philip was in Mexico, he knew even the artisans. So they were traditional woven huaraches. They're like sandals with like leather stripes, like woven into each other. And so it requires like artisan work. And he knew all of them, and they wanted to display it. And this is where the idea was already born, because the first attempt was, hey, let's embed like a small NFC chip along the stages when an artisan is actually creating the shoes, on all the stages of a supply chain as much as possible, and then actually know who has contributed and when and what they have been doing, so that me as a consumer later, I can scan this and really purchase products been happening in that supply chain. So this is where it all started. Now, it wasn't a scalable approach, because first thing, it's like, sounds so stupid, but you put an NFC chip into a shoe. First of all, it's not that sustainable to glue it into it. And second of all, in which one of those shoes is it? It's not visible for consumers. So practical problems we ran into. However, back then, 2017-18, the sustainability brand pool was rather small in Germany, and when they went to a fair and they showcased it, their booth just got overrun by demand. Everyone wanted to have it. Everyone came, I mean, especially in the sustainability area, and said, well, we are sustainable. We want to showcase that. Please, we need it. And this is when we started out Retraced fully. So out of the footwear brand, this is when I came in, because we really needed to scale this as a technical solution, and got together and founded Retraced in Germany together. And yeah, since then have providing and exploring and new areas where we can help the brands even further, starting from this original idea. Hey, brands, submit your information. Let's explore the supply chain, collect as much information. Then ultimately on your product, you can provide this passport, digital product passport. So what on EU level will come in 2-3 years as requirement, we had 5 years ago already. Not in the drawer, but actually attached to products.
Wow, what a story. What a story. That's fantastic. Almost like a fairy tale story to start such a company, right? Beautiful. Beautiful. And also that you know each other from high school, that is something that I've not heard before. I have to say that. That's great. That's
yeah. Great. I have to add, probably it's I mean, I have to also admit, I'm just also lucky in life getting together. There is this trust bond. Setting up a company, I've done a lot of projects in my life, and it always, once it got real, it's when you stop actually on it. You identify who is really trustworthy, like with whom do you really want to make this bond. And there was this natural, like, just going forward, really, we just devoted every single second we had. And initially it was like, hey, Peter, let's get started. You just hire us a few tech people. And I thought, yeah, that's nice. Let's do a little bit of a project. But we quickly realized, no, really, they have to build the salad. Other brands want to have access to that. So we had a super fast go-to-market as well. We reached out to Oracle, really Oracle for startups back then, to really blitz scale up into the market. So we were, after 2 months, we had actually the first app in the App Store. And that has quite some lead time with all the check-in and compliance mechanisms, and showed it actually as an Oracle fair back then, based on blockchain, more or less. And yeah, that was just nice. This bonding, this trust you have, is such a tremendously important foundation for a successful company. And then at the right moment in the right market, because you cannot bet on compliance.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, again, what a story. And also, I love these, when companies start from such a almost by accident, right? Because you just saw massive demand, and then you jump into it and you already have all of that demand. That's fantastic. I really want to dive into how you've started this in terms of the selling, right? Of course, this show is about selling impact. Your demand, you instantly got a lot of demand, let's say, but I'm curious how you really started it off, because of course you are a platform, right? Your value is in the whole supply chain being on that platform. course, you have more value to provide, but that seems to be the main value, right? So how did you start out in terms of selling this and getting the whole supply chain involved?
So first we started out, and our go-to-market was, let's go to brands who want to showcase their transparency towards consumers. It was back then an intrinsic motivation of most brands to do this. There was not yet a compliance requirement. And then the first thing hit the market, which was this AKSG in Germany, the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act law. And that actually told companies, hey, from specific thresholds onwards, it's not just enough to do some due diligence on your direct partners. You have to do it on your indirect partners. And that was like a wake-up call. I think this was pretty much happening as well with COVID. So we were a company which was back then in extreme unluck, because especially consumer communication was really good on getting along with QR codes, and then suddenly, well, there's no brick and mortar stores open anymore. So we pivoted instantly to online stores, and they wanted to publish information there. But a lot of times brands were unable to submit the information anymore about the supply chains, because they did not know actually the supply chains. So what has happened is actually that we've identified the problem that we need to explore within the supply chain. So the first go-to-market, to answer it again, was about just brands showcasing consumers the transparency they know. But then they realized, well, it's not enough to show just my partners. That's like boring for everyone. Everyone knows your partner. But the indirect one, we have to work with the manufacturers. And that's where we started a user solutions team already back then. And we said, hey, we need to pivot the solution to make it attractive for suppliers. That was, I think, fundamental. That was a couple of months into COVID, and we realized that's the way. The platform we are building, despite that I'm talking here solely about brands, they're not the primary users on it. They're the ones who digest a bit of data, like obviously make educated decisions and stuff, but the submission is on supplier side, supply chain side. And we have realized that, I would say, very early on, I would say the earliest, and that gave us this kickstart now, because once you get the suppliers, make the platform attractive for them, easy to use, that they understand the benefit. I do this for one brand. Hey, but if you have two brands, they benefit from it. They have efficiency gains. They just submit the certification once. And depending on their size, that's now getting very interesting. They obviously have also a bit of pressure on the brand saying, you don't tell me which solution I use. Back then there was also little of solutions, but they say, I have Retraced. Here, please access Retraced. There are all my certificates. And yet, despite being kind of like free, like that was always important. Like if you just submit information, it's free, that they can benefit from efficiency gains was no-brainer. And then slowly they started to realize, and we elicited for suppliers, it is not a game about compliance. That's for the brands. For suppliers, it's about marketing. It's about positioning yourself towards your clients, who are brands. And that fundamental concept was for us like, all right, well, that means we have to build the platform to make it easy for them to report to everyone, not just brands we have on a platform. And so we have this zigzag effect in the network. We get brands, they have compliance requirement. That's it. Nowadays, you come to us. Suppliers, well, you have to submit the information. Why not do it in Retrace? You benefit if other brands are on it. Now you need to get this critical mass. But because we were in Germany first, we knew a lot of sustainability brands. And let's face it, even nowadays, the brands, the overlap of supply chains, there is some. We just see it because we know already which suppliers are already on a platform when the next brand joins. And then we say, hey, you benefit because other brands may also benefit. And then the next brand comes and says, well, my suppliers are already on Retrace. Perfect. They submit the information. I get up-to-date information. I don't have to send emails for them back. I get it already out of the box when I join Retrace. So you get the zigzag. And yeah, that's how we went with it. And maybe a bit towards onboarding of suppliers. We made a lot of learnings there. In the beginning, it was mostly Europe. So there are a couple in Portugal as well, manufacturers. So that was beneficial. We could still best understand what's happening. Like we could travel there. However, the major learning for me in my life was when I traveled to Pakistan in the middle of COVID. There was actually a trip to Pakistan, Karachi, to one of our clients now, Artistic Millionaires. They are one of the major, if not the major exporter of apparel items in Pakistan. And we traveled there to really understand the supply chain on the lower levels and what they want to do. And we've also realized something else. They want to assure for themselves quality in the supply chain. So brand, compliance, the supplier, you have marketing, and you have down upstream the supply chain, you name it. So towards farmer side, you have then quality assurance, because you want to check out who of your supply chain partners provided the best materials. That will save you a lot of money in your production, because the later you see defects, the more costly it is.
Wow, that's super interesting. It sounds so, let's say, simple when you say it, right? Because it all stems from this fundamental principle where it is you have to provide the value to the suppliers for them to actually go on this, right? And for your context, I haven't told you before, but I've spoken to a lot of of companies aiming to create this type of platform, right? For the supply chain, and pretty much all of them, the challenge that they had was to get the suppliers on board with this, right? That was the main challenge, and it seems to stem from this fundamental principle. But how do you think you have managed to really set yourself apart from them, right, and grow so fast?
So what we have initially focused on was, we knew supply chain and death and the state of digitalization. So, I mean, if I'm building a Stripe, my opposite party is very digitalized, very tech savvy. But I've realized, well, in Pakistan, when we talked about farmers and making it approachable, the tech literacy isn't that high. It means I have to work with icons rather than text, which was it's very profound, and it's like sounding, yeah, well, that makes sense. But if you build a platform, you're like, it's like this typical dashboard with a lot of text. So this discrepancy made it very clear for us early on, we need to internationalize and need to provide everything in a local language. So we started to instantly localize our dashboard in all the major languages. So we had instantly 8 languages available. I mean, translation isn't that crazily complicated anymore. It did slow down a little bit the development cycle early on. Nowadays, translation can be done with AI very fast, but back then it took time. And we instantiated we call it the user solution, which is a team dedicated for every user on the platform. Yes, we have an indicator if the user is coming from paying client or not. However, they are treated all the same. They worked a lot on a help center, which is very, very, very elaborated. So explaining a lot through videos, explaining a lot through text. Also structuring onboarding calls. So that team not only took over all the support inside of the platform, so we measured instantly from the beginning the response time they had, because it was very crucial for us to provide it around the globe and really respond, because we knew if a supplier is in the platform, not paying, but we get them actually, then it's crucial that this time, if they have any question, is as short as possible to respond and unblock them. Because once they would be gone, they would be gone. Like we saw that very early in the numbers. So we really focused on that. We hired internationally, so a lot of languages, and expanded that team. So that was the in-platform support. And then when it came to brand onboarding, like when brands actually joined, we also used them because of their amount of languages for really supply onboarding, we call it. So we batch them, like all the suppliers, regionally, language-wise. They have their own principles, depends on the brand and how the network looks like, because the brand knows its partners, and then they can just split all these supply chain companies up, and then they do batch onboardings. And actually, we have figured out vast differences of styles and culture. So me as a German, I make a tutorial, half an hour PowerPoint, here you go, now you know how to use it. No, luckily very early on we had someone native Chinese joining the company, because we had more and more Chinese clients. And actually it turned out in China it's different. You provide the videos and you have a session, but in the session everyone just asks questions. Like it's assumed that people can learn autonomous up front. It's just the style, the cultural habit, the education they went through. And that was, it's so simple. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. But if I went there and did it, I would have not known. So this is why we made key hires in our user solutions team to have a high diversity in languages and cultural backgrounds. Actually, generally, based on that, the entire company was very diverse. So we had also developers in the beginning with Turkish heritage. Well, they were obviously then used in those calls to onboard Turkish suppliers because we didn't have someone in Turkish for user solutions, but we just said, yeah, of course. And the effects for business are manifold positive because suddenly I am sending a developer to talk to a potential user directly. Now, in how many companies is that happening? Yeah, everyone wants to do this agile and talking to clients, but it's very difficult. But here, the developer is leading the talk to onboard suppliers. The developer needs to understand sufficiently what they have to do and how. That was it's also like, all right, well, you have a win-win actually from that. And this is how we scale. We put a lot of effort on supplier onboarding. So we knew you get one brand, you get 500 suppliers in behind, like not tier one, so not the direct partners, but then cascading an average. This is just what we get on. And we knew this is where the value lies because if they're on it, they provide the data and only then a marketplace will work.
Yeah, that's great. So it's really putting so much effort in to make those suppliers make it as easy as possible for them, right? And the amount of dedication with that in terms of going to Pakistan and instantly hiring people from all over the world, right? Wow, great, fantastic. Love that story. And I want to understand a bit more about that supplier side. Is it actually that simple in terms of when a brand signs up, all of their suppliers pretty much have to come along, or is there kind of your own sales team behind that, like actually contacting those suppliers? Like, how does that look?
So, the typical life cycle of a client of ours is a brand comes, the go-to-market, as I said, is this compliance legal requirements. So that's pretty straightforward. Sometimes they don't even know what they fall under. So that's quite interesting because there is in so many countries something coming up, and it's usually depending on sometimes even global sales volume that you fall under specific legislation. And we help them to chop it down to, hey, let's do first this German supply chain due diligence. Let's go to France then. There's this AJEC law as well. And one by one, because it does require slightly different functionality. Why I'm saying that is because this slightly different functionality you need to use as a brand now defines how many suppliers you actually need. In best case, you always have your entire supplier network, so your partner network on Retraced. However, we have found out, it's typical in every industry, you have your ABC rating of your partners, so where you have actually purchasing volume. So what's most important is to onboard the ones where you basically cover 80-90% of your purchasing volume. Because you may have all these, especially they are called trims and components, so small suppliers, well, they do a small thing in your supply chain, and they're usually also very, very big, like YKK and other providers, but they're not the ones we have to onboard based on your purchasing volume, because it's mostly for compliance law important to actually do your due diligence. Due diligence means you likely will never be perfect. Likely means never. I mean, I know it in IT with risk, but you do the best you possibly can. And so we focus on that and get them actually into the platform. Now, based on this, now it depends, as I just mentioned, on the feature. So very often we obviously try to attempt to onboard the second tier. But there are some features which require definitely more than others. I give you two examples. One is traceability. Traceability is really you work with everyone in supply chain together. That's especially in the US. There's like something out there, legislation which the brands have to comply to. So they actually trace down, we call it product backwards. So you have your product, you figure out where it actually originated from, where it went through. And then you need everyone on the platform. However, we always knew as a Retraced, you also can do this like yourself. So you provide the data for the other parties. However, the efficiency gain is nearly zero because that meant you had the data in the first place. So you just have a different visualization. So it's not really powerful. It's not a sticky tool. The tool stickiness comes when the other players are in the platform and they get notified when an order was placed and they have to update the data. And for traceability, we need deeper tiers. But we have other features, for example, corrective and preventive actions plan. So what that means is you get an audit, for example, let's say 8,000 or other sustainability audits, and there are usually findings. So you get a final report, it says a rating, 1 to 5, A, B, C, D, you name it. And then you have the findings in there. And you want to work, I mean, you receive it from your supply chain partner and they say, yeah, this is my audit report and these are the findings. And now actually what the sustainability manager wants to work on to actually make impact is those findings and mitigating or preventing them. And so that means in the platform to work with them together. Usually this works through Excel. Everyone makes different colors, annotates it, prefix with name, crazy. And so we help them with that one to work in the platform. And there you just need that direct partner usually. So you don't need the dev. So, and corrective and preventive actions you need, for example, for the German due diligence. So here we have two examples. The one is a US one where you should have everyone or as many as possible, but then you have the German one where they definitely the next partner must be on board.
Yeah, makes sense. And then from a pure growth and sales perspective, because being a platform, of course, you have this advantage where the bigger you get, the bigger the advantage gets of being on there, right? How does your sales and growth look like right now? Is it really driven from the suppliers that are already on the platform that are pretty much doing the sales for you? Or what is happening there?
It is actually, you're absolutely right. The bigger the network becomes, the more it's like this own flywheel in itself. So what does happen is, maybe to explain how it works, brands are the one coming to us, go to market is the compliance need. So they will need to pay for the solution. However, the ones just providing the data will not be paying for the solution. And they just provide the data and we help them to make it more efficient. Now, if they want to drive a business value for themselves out of it, for example, using it for marketing purposes and so on, they may be then classified to different tiers. And what happens is at one point they will identify, well, it makes a lot of sense because actually suppliers are suffering from a platform fatigue. That's actually a term in the apparel industry nowadays because there isn't just us, there are also other specialized platforms for just certificate management where you also have to work in. So it really is meh for the suppliers and they're really keen on just working in one. And they want to consolidate it and really make it their main system. And then it also becomes more valuable for them. They're also becoming a client. And though, despite being a client or not, some in our network, it is magic, are seeing the value of just using this to store the data. So not actively using it, but they then reach out themselves to their clients to recommend Retraced. So we do see that I would say roughly 40% comes just from network referral internally, where you can say it's always difficult and sales to say exactly pinpoint down, was it on that fair or was it really the network effect? Because for that, the industry is yet too much interwoven. But we do often hear this referral, like we have some indicators for that. And the rest is definitely fair. So there's just awareness of that. And then there are a couple of just RFPs, RFIs, but that means our marketing team did a great job. So if a company is actually searching for a solution, they search in the internet and make requests for proposals or requests for information to better understand. These are usually then the really big projects. But often it's that, yeah, we have one chunk marketing, one chunk, well, you could say fairs. And then the rest, you have like 50-50, if you want to call it like that, network, referrals, just spinning it up, having this internal cycle going on. So it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, that's great. It's the best way to grow, right? If you can grow off network and referrals, that's the ultimate position to be in. Do you do anything specifically to kind of promote this, to kind of nudge them into making those referrals?
So if you ask for referral bonuses or so, no, there's nothing like that existent. It's most of the times, what does sometimes happen, the suppliers know each other or they're together in one pool, in one organization. And what happens is either we partner with that organization and say, hey, we can tell you how that works. And I think a lot of participants in this organization are very interested. So in Germany, there's called Textilbündnis. So it's like a club for apparel companies. And so we partnered up with them and say, hey, we can educate, we can have regular training sessions. We don't force you to use Retraced, obviously, but we do provide a solution. And something similar does happen on supplier side. They do get sometimes together in loose groups, especially towards huge retailers. So like the really big 5 in the world, they get together in countries and they just structure themselves, because sometimes it depends on the sourcing agents, how they distribute actually the requirements. So here briefly, what is a sourcing agent? So if you have a retailer with a huge demand, then they usually don't place with like 20 manufacturers, but they go to one sourcing agent and say, you deal with it. I need like 20 million pairs. And then the sourcing agent will deal with the redistribution, because they are usually then located in the country where you want to source, and they will deal with the redistribution. And usually they then have some kind of a network in there. So that's also where you have to say they get all together. They would obviously work all on the same platform. So that does happen. But it's nothing which we foster. It's just something they have naturally wise in the countries.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And what would you say across the board, right, in terms of your journey so far and growing this platform? What would you say is the biggest challenge purely on a growth perspective, right? When you look at it from a marketing and sales perspective right now, is it or what has been over the past years?
From a sales perspective, I would say we just have to onboard faster. And one of the challenges is that clients cannot necessarily do it that fast. So usually projects get delayed, like clients start with us and then they say, yeah, next quarter I'm actually ready, which is kind of great because we can do resource planning, but it slows down. It naturally slows down the growth, because obviously we cannot onboard the suppliers while the brand hasn't started. So that's something I would define as a growth problem, not really, but it just delays things. And they're delayed like 2 months often for sure. So 3 months is very common. That means you can even as a company nearly hire the person and then have the onboarding happening in 3 months. And that natural delay leads also to this very lagging KPIs. So if you look at, well, our network did this month great in growth, you have to go back and say, whom did I close like 4 or 5 months ago? That makes it a bit tricky to have these lagging KPIs, because you don't close a contract, next day they start. It's not a self-service SaaS. I hoped always for it from my technical perspective, but it doesn't work. Put your credit card here, off you go. It just doesn't work in this industry. They do this project teams, and this is where you are delayed. And this is where sales and marketing, sales, then handing over, then when customer success for us, the dedicated team starts, it's usually a delay of 2-3 months, which means we are not getting the brands, which we would like to, the suppliers, which we obviously would like to say, hey, cool, let's onboard them. But you can't reach out without the brand actually starting. You need this gentle push.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially working with the big companies that you're working with, right? Okay, and in terms of right now, of course, you're in a. I'm gonna ask you one more question about the growth, because right now you're in a stage where you're growing 50% off of network and referrals, 50% other, right? What would be your main focus, like going ahead now? How do you see the future, and how do you see you growing further?
So we have identified that suppliers are key. We have proven that with our numbers. It is one of the decision reasons brands are coming to us and why we are leading here. So we know that. And what we want to ensure now is to get the relevant ones, or all relevant ones. So we have done a lot of research in the past months about it. It's still ongoing to identify who are the relevant ones we need to get on board. So then either reaching out directly to the relevant ones and explaining the case, the marketing case, or reaching out to brands, because you can find that out as well with reverse engineering, and then reach out to them and get them on board. So that's one of the, I would say, key key focus points, really getting the key players, because it's especially the sourcing agents, they have a lot of power as well on ensuring the network also comes on the platform. And you need this collaboration that, like, you need the other party, and you usually do it with the relevant ones, the ones with the highest purchasing volume. Despite that, I wanted that you work on every finding and every audit. It's likely not going to happen. You're going to focus on the most important of your supply chain partners, which is highest purchasing volume. And then on those, that means those are relevant for us. And you can identify them actually. We can already do that based on obviously network we have, but then we really want to go there and target that. We are still looking if it's specific verticals, if it's in global for specific vertical, if it's a vertical in Europe, but then what's the easiest? Because we believe if we focus 2 months on that research, which one is the easiest? And target that precisely, you can make this network effect anyway self-happening, because you can effectively say, well, we can kind of even do manual Turk. You can even crawl to some extent the data in the internet just to say, hey, if you come on board, I know we will get the suppliers because we've spoken already to 50% of the suppliers of yours because we found out, and we can just talk to everyone. So making it happening even faster so that you get through verticals. That's the idea now.
Yeah, great. I'm going to tell you something. I asked this question to some of the other platforms as well, right? I'm not going to name drop here, but what I hear is this challenge in terms of finding brands and this and that, but you are only speaking about the supplier side. When I ask you the question about what is the main challenge in growth and what is the main focus, you're answering we need suppliers, right? We want to make it as easy as possible for suppliers. We want to get all suppliers on board. And that is such a different perspective, because those, of course, are not your main revenue drivers. But it's a very interesting strategy when looking at it. And I believe that is a very big part of what has made you successful.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can just repeat that. I think we have been lucky in life, identifying during COVID time, not giving up, but identifying that as a pain that you do not know in your supply chain. Because what has happened going back to COVID is a lot of brands were not aware of COVID yet in Europe, but they had already impact because it started back in China. So China was already in lockdown while everyone in the world was like, oh, okay, whatever happens over there. But brands in Europe have already not received their goods. And that brought us to like, what's going on? Because the brand said, well, I cannot advertise the season, sorry, in Retraced, because I don't have them. I don't know where they are, because I'm just talking to some sourcing agent or some indirect stuff, and they just didn't know. And so this is when we knew we need to get the suppliers on the platform. They are the ones providing the data, and they need to have this high net promoter score, this no-brainer experience. We have seen it on site, the tech literacy, like how easy it must be, helping them in their localized language and making it just understood. So our user solutions team, by the way, so the one for the help center and the platform supplier onboarding, mostly consist of people not only multicultural, but who had at least a couple of years working experience at a supplier site. So that means they know exactly how suppliers typically operate and how it would work. Because sometimes it's tricky to find out, because the partner we work with at supplier side is always a merchandiser. So it's always the salesperson on the supplier side. So you don't see what's happening behind it. It's always the same person you talk to, because they are providing the data, but they know what's happening underneath. So they know what that merchandiser, the salesperson on supplier side, needs to ask of from which department and how to do that. So because the merchandiser obviously needs to get the certificates from someone, and it needs to be propagated throughout the company, because when a manufacturer is sourcing good, they get the last transaction certificate, let's say, of organic cotton. But that needs to be somewhere captured in the company so that the person towards the brand can actually expose it and say, yeah, that is the certificate for that order you asked me for. So, and since they know what's exactly happening inside, I think that we figured out luckily early on, and we build up on it, and the numbers show it to us at least that it does work. Brands are then just coming. It's a no-brainer solution to go to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing the story and for sharing all your experiences. It's been super interesting.
Well, it was a pleasure all from my side, Keith.
Great, great. I want to give you one last question or opportunity. Let's say to ask you, who do you want to be reaching out to you? So, if what specific group that would be listening should be reaching out to you, and who do you want to reach?
I mean, honestly, it depends obviously who as a listener is listening to this podcast. I mean, if it's someone from a brand or supplier side to reach out, of course, no problem. We are happy to showcase what we can offer, especially to ease, if it's brand side compliance paid, if it's supplier side offering marketing opportunities towards your own clients. When it's someone interested, of course, working on such a solution, reach out to us. I mean, we have definitely every listener of this podcast will have this intrinsic motivation for the topic of let's keep the world a good place and make it even a better one. And I think this is a strong bond we have in a company, connecting every one of us together, pushing us every day really the boundaries of what's possible and improving this area and making it a better industry. So there as well, reach out, or obviously if there's anyone else in the audience wanting to understand how the details work, our product management department is also always happy to answer questions, help with master thesis, you know it. We always like to answer questions in any direction.
Yeah, I love the openness, and it does seem like a really cool place to work at. So I'm not gonna lie, it's such a global team as well. That's very, very interesting. You don't see that. You don't see that often. That's great. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for participating and sharing.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.